The light in the classroom was soft and constant, coming from every surface at once. It was a light that had never known a shadow from a storm cloud or the harsh angle of a midday sun. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like blooming algae. This was room 7C at the Harmony Orbital Institute, a place of gentle learning for young minds from a dozen peaceful worlds. Gene sat perfectly still at his new desk, his hands folded in his lap. He was trying to make himself small, which wasn't hard. He was the smallest one here. The others in the class were a living painting of strange shapes and colors. There was a girl with skin like pale blue silk and fine hair that floated as if underwater. A boy with 4 slender arms was carefully arranging crystals on his desk. Another student looked like a small, fuzzy tree, its leaves twitching with curiosity. Their teacher, Ilara, moved with a floating grace. She came from a world with very little gravity. Her long limbs seemed to flow from one position to another. Her voice was like wind chimes. "Class, we have a new student joining our xenobiology circle today," she chimed. All the multicolored eyes and sensory patches turned toward the front. Gene felt his neck grow warm. "This is Gene. He comes to us from the Sol system, from the planet Earth." A soft, whispering sound filled the room. It was the sound of scales shifting, of leaves rustling, of air being sucked in gently. They all knew what that meant. The institute had students from many planets, but only one kind came from a place like that. Ilara gave a calming wave of her hand. Now, let's welcome Gene. Remember our rule. All knowledge is valuable. Jin's homeworld is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. This means it has many active geological processes, a very dense atmosphere, extreme weather, and a vibrant biosphere where competition for life is strong. She was using the kindest words from the official guide. Gene kept his eyes on his hands. He knew the other words: predators, catastrophes, violence. "Gene, would you like to share something about Earth?" Ilara asked, her voice encouraging. Gene looked up. He had practiced this. "Hello," he said. His voice sounded too sharp, too loud in the quiet room. He saw a few of the students flinch. He made his next words softer. "On Earth, we have blue skies, and sometimes green plants grow very tall. They are called trees." He stopped, thinking that was safe. The boy with 4 arms, whose name was Tall, tilted his head. His voice was a series of clicks. His translator pendant around his neck turned it into soft standard speech. "What is the average wind speed on your world? Is it always within a safe range?" Gene thought of hurricanes. He thought of gentle breezes. "It changes," he said. The girl with the floating hair, Mina, spoke next. Her voice was like a song. "Our world has no strong winds. The air is always calm. It is safer for our spores to travel." She said it not to be mean, but as a simple fact. A fact that made her world better. "We have many calm things too," Gene said, but the conversation was already moving away from him. Ilara gestured to an empty seat at the end of a row near the back. "Please take a seat there, Gene. We are glad to have you." Gene picked up his bag. It was made of a plain, tough fabric. As he walked down the aisle between the desks, the others leaned away. It was not a big movement. The tree-like student pulled its branches in slightly. Tall shifted his crystals to the far side of his desk. Mina's floating hair drifted in the opposite direction. It was not a sound, but the classroom grew quieter. The quiet of held breath. The quiet of watchfulness. Gene reached his seat and sat down. He placed his bag neatly on the floor. The desk was smooth and cool. He looked ahead at the learning screen, which was showing a slow, beautiful image of a gas giant with rings. From this seat, he could see the whole room. He could see all the other students sitting together, clusters of 2 or 3, connected by their shared understanding of a safe and gentle universe. He was an island. A small, quiet island in a sea of soft colors and gentle sounds. The lesson continued. Ilara spoke about symbiotic relationships on the world of clicks, where 2 life forms helped each other to breathe and eat. It was a lesson about peace and cooperation. Gene listened carefully. He thought about the bees and the flowers in his grandmother's garden on Earth. The bees could sting. The flowers sometimes had thorns. But they needed each other too. It was a different kind of cooperation, one with an edge to it. He did not raise his hand to share this. When the period ended, the students gathered their things with soft rustles and chimes. They moved in groups toward the door, talking about the lesson, about what they would do in the recreation dome. Jean took his time. He waited for them all to leave before he stood up as he walked out into the wide, curved hallway. He saw them ahead, glowing under the perfect light. He walked alone, his steps making a faint, solid sound on the floor. There's made no sound at all. He knew the path to his next class. He knew the path to his small, private sleeping room. He knew the rules. He was here to learn, and so were they. But as he walked, he felt the space around him. It was an empty space, a bubble that moved with him. It was the space given to something unpredictable. Something from a world where the sky was not always calm, and where life was not always gentle. That he missed the noise of Earth. The loud, honest noise of life that didn't hide what it was. Here, the quiet was the loudest thing he had ever heard. The quiet became a routine. Jean moved through his days at the Harmony Orbital Institute like a careful visitor in a museum of delicate things. He learned the patterns. He learned that if he moved too quickly, the student from the low-gravity world, a boy named Leo, would startle and float several inches off his chair. He learned that speaking in anything louder than a soft tone made the fine membranes on Tal's neck flutter with distress. His teachers were kind, but distant. They used the same careful words as Alara. Vigorous instead of dangerous. Dynamic instead of deadly. In astronomy, when they discussed Earth's solar system, the moon was called geologically stable. Jean remembered the videos of astronauts bouncing in slow motion. He thought of the massive craters. He said nothing. His only real conversation was with his bunk. It was a small, plain room. The institute had provided him with a special gravity plate so he could sleep at Earth normal. Felt like a heavy, familiar blanket. The rest of the room was set to the standard gentle pull of the station. It made him feel light, but never free. He had brought one thing from home. It was a small, woody plant in a simple gray pot. A bonsai tree. It was a juniper, his grandfather had told him, a survivor. It was maybe 50 years old, but it was only as tall as his hand. Its trunk was twisted and thick, like a muscle. Its leaves were tiny green scales. He kept it on the windowsill of his room, which looked out not onto a landscape, but onto a wall of the inner garden corridor. Soft, pink light from glowing moss washed over it. Every afternoon, after his classes, he would come back to his room. He would take a small spray bottle and gently mist the bonsai's leaves. He would check the soil with his fingertip. Sometimes he would just look at it. Its stillness was not like the stillness of the institute. Its stillness was the stillness of a thing holding its ground. In the recreation dome, the other students played. Their games were beautiful. They played with floating orbs of light, guiding them through hoops with gentle gestures. They played a game on a flat table where they grew intricate patterns of crystalline sound, competing to make the most harmonious shape. Their laughter was like soft bells. One day, Jean finished his work early. He walked into the dome. The air was scented with something calming. He saw Mina, the girl with the silk blue skin, and Day, a quiet boy whose skin had a faint, bark-like texture. They were by the large viewer, which was showing a real-time image of a nebula, vast and purple and pink. He walked over, slowly. He stood a few feet away, watching the colors swirl. "It's very pretty," he said, keeping his voice low. Mina turned. Her floating hair moved in a slow wave. She smiled, but it didn't reach her large, dark eyes. It is the birth cloud of my grandmother's lineage. It is a place of gentle creation. No harsh radiation. Only soft dust becoming softer light. On Earth, Jean said, pointing to a particularly bright cluster. We would call that a star nursery. New suns are born there. It's a violent, very hot. Explosions make the new stars. The smile left Mina's face. Day took a small step back. The pleasant, calm feeling around them seemed to thin. Explosions? Mina said, her song voice tight. In a place of birth? That sounds painful. It's just how it happens, Jean said. But the explanation felt clumsy in his mouth. He had ruined it. He had brought violence into their peaceful picture. Our creation myths speak of a quiet gathering, Day said, his voice a dry rustle. A slow coming together. No explosions. He looked from the screen to Jean, his expression unreadable. Your world sees the universe differently. They didn't tell him to leave. They just turned back to the viewer, their postures closing slightly. The space between them and Jean became solid. Jean stood there for a moment longer, the noise of the gentle games feeling very far away. Then he turned and walked back to the corridor. He went to the Institute's small library database. He looked up the worlds of his classmates. Clicks, Mina's home. Average wind speed, 2 kilometers per hour. Highest recorded temperature, 28 degrees Celsius. Predatory life forms, none. Tal's world, constant, misty rain. No electrical storms. No tectonic activity. He read the entry for Earth. The list of extreme weather events, tectonic plate boundaries, the percentage of the biosphere classified as actively predatory or venomous. It was a list of facts. But here, in this place of soft light and softer sounds, facts were not neutral. They were a judgment. The next day in xenobiology, Alara asked them to share a memory of a favorite natural sound from their homeworlds. Mina described the spore hum, a low, musical vibration the forests made at dusk. Tal described the click rustle of the crystal sands shifting in the eternal mist. When it was Jin's turn, all the gentle eyes were on him. He thought of many sounds, the crash of ocean waves, the howl of a winter wind, the chorus of frogs in a pond at night. He knew these would be wrong. They would be sounds of power, of threat. He thought of his grandfather's garden. Rain, he said finally. The sound of rain on leaves. Gentle. Sometimes. Alara gave him an encouraging nod. But Jean saw Tkala's 4 hands pause in their note-taking. He saw Mina glance at her friend. It was as if he had said the word rain, but they had heard the word sometimes. The unspoken rule was now as clear as the viewport showing the stars. He was from a different kind of place. His very nature was a disruption. His calm was seen not as peace, but as the quiet before a storm they all feared. To include him was to invite the chaos of his world into their perfect, ordered existence. So Jean stopped trying. He did his work. He answered when called upon with short, simple answers. He ate his meals alone, the specially packed nutrient bars that tasted like dust and metal. He walked the halls in his small, quiet bubble. And every afternoon, he returned to his room. He would turn off the main light, leaving only the soft pink glow from the moss. He would sit on the floor by the window. He would look at his bonsai tree, its twisted form strong and patient in the alien light. He would take the spray bottle and mist it. The tiny droplets would catch the pink light and sparkle. For just a second, like distant, lonely stars. In that quiet room, with this one tough, quiet thing from home, he didn't have to explain what sometimes meant. The tree already knew. The trip to the Pangalactic Preserve was the highlight of the term. Excitement, a gentle and buzzing kind, filled the transport pod. Jean sat near the back, watching the others. Mina had a small recording device floating near her shoulder. Tal was discussing filtration systems with Leo. Their voices were bright with anticipation. They were going to see wonders, beautiful and serene life from the safest, most nurtured worlds in the galaxy. The preserve was a massive, transparent dome nestled against the side of the station. Inside, it was a patchwork of perfect environments. Soft yellow grass under a fake orange sun. A pool of crystal-clear water with floating, glowing lilies. The air in each section was carefully tuned to smell like gentle flowers or clean rain. Their guide was a tall being with long, sensitive feelers where hair might be. His name was Kale. His voice was a soothing hum. Welcome, young observers. Here we celebrate life in its most peaceful forms. Please remember to stay on the path. The fields are for looking, not for touching. We do not wish to disturb the calm. They walked in a neat group. Kale showed them the grazers of Lyra, large animals with 6 legs and fur that shifted color with their mood. Right now, the herd was a soft, content blue. They ate the yellow grass with slow, rhythmic bites. There was no fear in their large eyes. There were no predators here. Not ever. See how harmony manifests, Kale hummed. No conflict, only balance. Jean watched. They were beautiful, but their movements were so slow. On Earth, an animal that moved like that would not live long. He thought of deer, always twitching an ear, always ready to bolt. This was different. This was peace that had never been broken. Mina sighed happily. It is like a living dream. They moved to the next area, the Apex Grove. The name was a careful one. Here were the largest and most impressive herbivores from lush worlds. The path wound up a small hill, giving a view over a wide enclosure with a shallow pond and strange, bulbous trees. Behold the stellar plinths, Kale said, pointing. The creatures were enormous. 4 of them. They had long, thick legs like stone columns and bodies covered in a hard, mossy hide. Their heads were small, with 3 dark, gentle eyes. They moved with a slow, earth-shaking grace, dipping their heads to the pond to drink. They were the biggest things Jean had ever seen, but their size felt calm. It was the size of a mountain, not of a threat. They have no natural enemies, Kale explained. Their world has no large predators. Their size is simply for reaching the highest leaves. They are the gentle kings of their world. The class was quiet with awe. This was what Apex meant to them. Not fierceness, but quiet, unchallenged grandeur. Jean felt a strange feeling. It wasn't dislike. It was more like loneliness. This whole place was a museum of safety. It made his own world feel like a screaming, dangerous place. It made him feel wrong, like a sharp rock in a bed of soft moss as they stood watching. A soft alarm chimed, not loud, but enough to make Leo float upward a few inches. Kale's feelers twitched. A minor containment field is recalculating. It is perfectly normal. A slight adjustment for the atmospheric mix. Nothing to be concerned about. The group relaxed. They trusted the systems. They trusted the calm. Then, from a smaller habitat to the left, something happened. A servicing drone, moving too quickly near the barrier of the Bramblewarren exhibit, clipped a power relay. There was a sharp pop, a sound that was terribly loud in the quiet dome. A section of the shimmering containment field flickered, turned a sickly gray, and vanished. For a moment, nothing. Then, a creature about the size of a large dog shot out of the opening. It was the Bramble Runner. It was not a predator. It was a prey animal from a world of dense, thorny thickets. Its body was lean and covered in tough, matted fur. Its long legs ended in sharp, hard points for digging and defense. Its head swiveled, 3 black eyes wide with panic. It was built for one thing: frantic, zigzagging escape. The preserve was not its thorny home. It was open space and smooth paths. It was terrified that it bolted. A wave of pure, soundless shock hit the class. Then the screams started. Not loud screams, but high-pitched, whistling cries of terror. The group shattered. Leo yelped and zipped backwards, colliding with a tree. Tal scrambled, his 4 arms flailing. The students scattered like leaves in a sudden wind. The Bramble Runner, disoriented and scared, saw the movement and ran toward it. It wasn't attacking. It was trying to find cover, but its path was a blind, frantic dash. It headed straight for a cluster of students who were frozen, too scared to move. Mina was among them. She had dropped her recorder and stood perfectly still, her blue skin pale, her floating hair plastered flat against her head in fear. Kale was calling out, his humming voice strained. Do not move. Be calm. But calm was impossible. This was chaos, and chaos was a foreign, terrifying language. Jean didn't think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. On Earth, sudden movement meant danger. But it also meant you had to act. You couldn't just freeze. He didn't run away. He stepped forward, putting himself on the path between the panicked creature and the frozen students. He moved to the side of the path, not directly in front of the runner's sharp points. He knew not to block a terrified animal head-on, that he spread his arms wide, making his shape bigger. He planted his feet firmly on the soft path. He took a deep breath and let it out in a low, firm, booming voice. HFY. It wasn't a shout of anger. It was a command. A stop. A wall of sound. The bramble runner skidded. His sharp legs scrambled on the path. It twisted its head, its black eyes locking onto Jean. It saw a creature standing its ground, making a big shape, making a loud noise. It didn't see fear. In its panic, this was confusing. This was a new kind of obstacle. It hesitated. For 2 long seconds, it danced in place, unsure. That was all the time needed. 2 preserve keepers, carrying non-threatening barrier projectors, rushed in from the side. A soft, blue energy field gently nudged the bramble runner, guiding it away from the path and toward an open service door. The creature ducked inside, and the door slid shut. The silence that fell was heavy and broken by soft, shaky whimpers. The containment field flickered back to life. The calm of the preserve returned, but it was a damaged calm, a fragile thing. All eyes turned to Jean. He lowered his arms. His heart was pounding in his ears. He saw their faces. Mina was staring at him, her eyes huge. Tal looked from Jean to the now empty path. Leo was slowly drifting back down to the ground. There was no gratitude in their looks. There was only a deep, trembling shock. He had been calm in the chaos. He had faced the panic with a loud voice and a wide stance. He had done what came naturally. But in this world of gentle grazers and stellar plinths, what came naturally to him looked an awful lot like something else. It looked like control. It looked, to their frightened eyes, like a flicker of the very apex power their safe universe feared most. They weren't seeing the boy who helped. They were seeing, for the first time, a glimpse of the Deathworlder. The trip back to the Institute was silent. The quiet in the transport pod was different from before. It was not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of shock holding its breath. Jean sat in his usual seat at the back. He could feel their thoughts like a physical pressure, and no one looked at him. Mina sat with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the floor. Tal's 4 hands were clenched tightly together. Leo kept rubbing a spot on his arm where he had bumped the tree. The event replayed in the air between them. The sudden terror, the scrambling, and Jean standing firm, his voice like a crack of thunder in their soft world. Kale, their guide, had thanked Jean. He had used words like quick thinking and helpful diversion, but his feelers had been twitching nervously. The thanks felt official, like a report being filed, not like real gratitude. When they filed into the classroom the next day, the space around Jin's desk seemed wider. The bubble had grown. He took his seat and opened his learning pad. The soft glow of the screen was the only thing that felt normal. Alara came in. Her graceful movements seemed a little tense. She called the class to order. "I understand our trip to the preserve was eventful," she began, her chime voice careful. "I am glad everyone is safe. Sometimes, even in the most controlled environments, unexpected things can happen. It is a lesson in a variability." She was trying to make it a teaching moment. But her eyes skipped over Jean when she said, "Unexpected things." "Now," she said, her tone brightening a little too much, "let us discuss symbiotic relationships again. The classroom door slid open with a soft hiss. Everyone turned. A man walked in. He was human, or looked mostly human. He was tall and broad, wearing the simple gray uniform of the Institute's maintenance staff. His name was Mr. Choi. He was the keeper for the preserve's special exhibit, the one students rarely visited. He gave a short, polite nod to Alara. "Apologies for the interruption," Mr. Choi said. His voice was a low rumble, a sound that felt solid in the room of soft noises. "I need to check the environmental sensor in the far corner. It links to my section. It will only take a moment." Alara nodded quickly. "Of course. Please proceed." The students watched as Mr. Choi walked to the back of the room. His steps were quiet, but they carried a weight. He carried a small tool case. As he passed Jin's desk, he paused. Just for a second. His eyes, dark and calm, met Jin's. He gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Then he moved to the wall panel and began his work. No one thought much of it. But a few minutes later, the door hissed open again. This time, it was not a man who entered. A giant shape filled the doorway. It had to dip its great head to step through. The light in the room seemed to dim around it. It was the Leporian Frostmane. The class froze, not with panic this time, but with a pure, instinctual awe. The creature was magnificent. It was larger than the stellar plinths, but where they were slow and gentle, this being was pure, quiet power. Its fur was thick and white, streaked with shades of silver and glacial blue. It moved with a liquid grace that spoke of muscles built for endurance and sudden, explosive speed. Its eyes were the pale, sharp blue of ancient ice. Its name was Taeyong, which Mr. Choi had told Jean once meant sun. A joke about the creature's frozen homeworld. Taeyong was an apex predator from a Class 11 Deathworld, a planet of eternal blizzards and sheer, icy cliffs. It was intelligence housed in fierceness. It was here as part of an interspecies understanding program, cared for by Mr. Choi, who respected its nature. The Frostmane ignored the room. It walked forward, its paws making no sound on the floor. Its gaze swept over the students, a look of mild, detached interest. The students shrunk back in their seats, their breaths held. Mina's floating hair lay perfectly still, as if frozen. Mr. Choi, still at the wall panel, spoke without turning around. His voice was calm, conversational. He's just stretching his legs. Don't be alarmed. He's quite docile when not hunting. He likes to see the younger students sometimes. Says it keeps things interesting. The Frostmane, Taeyong, continued its slow walk, past the rows of desks, past Hall, who had gone perfectly rigid. It passed Leo, who had pressed himself flat against his chair. It passed Mina, who looked like she might turn to ice herself. Then it reached Jin's. ROW.IT stopped. The massive, furred head turned. Those ice-blue eyes looked down at the small human boy. For a heartbeat that lasted a century, Jean looked back. He saw the intelligence there. He saw the raw, contained power. He felt no fear. In that moment, he recognized something. Not a friend, but a fact. A truth about the universe that his classmates did not understand. Some worlds were hard. Some lives were forged in challenge. It did not make them evil. It just made them real slowly, with a dignity that was profound. The Frostmane lowered its great body. It settled onto the floor right beside Jin's chair. It wasn't leaning on him. It wasn't touching him. It simply sat, a mountain of fur and muscle and quiet authority. Then it rested its huge head on its front paws, its eyes half closing, its gaze pointed toward the front of the room. A soft, deep sigh ruffled the air. The message was not spoken. It did not need to be. In the absolute, breathless silence of the classroom, the most formidable being any of them had ever seen, a true apex creature from a world of deadly beauty, had chosen its place. And its place was beside the Deathworld child. Mr. Choi closed the wall panel with a soft click. He picked up his tool case. He walked back down the aisle, past the incredible sight of the dozing giant and the small, still boy. He paused at the door. He looked at Alara, whose graceful form was completely motionless. "Sensors fixed," he said, his rumble of a voice cutting the silence. "He'll leave when he's ready. He likes the quiet in here." Then he left, the door sliding shut behind him. The quiet he left behind was not the quiet of fear, nor the quiet of shock. It was a new kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a world being turned upside down. Every single student was staring. The unspoken rule, the one that had made Jean an island, was shattered. It had been broken not by words, but by a simple, undeniable action. The Frostmane did not growl. It did not snarl. It simply existed, a peaceful but undeniable shield. And it had chosen Jean. Jean, for his part, looked forward at the learning screen. He could feel the warmth from the massive body beside him. He could hear the slow, steady breath. He did not smile. He did not move. He just sat there, in the new and profound quiet, and for the first time since arriving at the Harmony Orbital Institute, he did not feel alone. The silence lasted the rest of the class period. Alara tried to continue her lesson. Her chime voice was thin and tight. She spoke about symbiotic relationships, but no one heard her. Every student in the room was acutely, painfully aware of the giant resting by the small human. Taeyong, the Frostmane, did not move. He seemed to be in a light doze, but the pale blue slits of his eyes were open just enough to watch the room. His presence was not a threat. It was a fact that changed everything. When the soft tone chimed to signal the end of class, no one moved. They all looked at Alara. Alara looked at the Frostmane. The creature let out another deep, rumbling sigh. Slowly, with that same impossible grace, he rose to his feet. He was even larger standing up. His head nearly brushed the ceiling. He glanced down at Jean once more. Then he turned and walked to the door. It opened automatically for him, and he padded out into the hallway without a sound. The moment the door closed, the room seemed to let out a collective breath it had been holding for an hour. There was a rustle of movement, a few soft, shaky clicks from Tkal. No one looked at Jean. They gathered their things with a new kind of hurry, their movements sharp with confusion. They left in a quiet cluster, whispering to each other in hushed, urgent tones. The bubble around Jean was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer an empty space of exclusion. It was now a space of awe and of a deep, uncomfortable shame. Jean was the last to leave. He walked through the hallway. He saw the others gathered in a tight group further down the corridor. Mina was speaking quickly, her hands moving. Leo was nodding, his usually floating posture slumped. They glanced back at him, then quickly looked away. He went to the meal hall. He got his nutrient bar and his water pouch. He sat at his usual empty table. For the first time, he noticed the other tables were more crowded. Students from different classes had pushed closer together, as if his empty table was a dark star pushing them away by its gravity. He ate alone, as always. But today, the loneliness felt different. It was no longer a simple fact. It was a question hanging in the air. The next day, something shifted. Jean walked into the xenobiology classroom. He went to his seat. He put his bag down. He noticed Mina, at her desk 2 rows over, was watching him. Not staring in fear, but looking, thinking. Her floating hair waved slowly. When Alara called the class to order, the door hissed open again. Taeyong walked in. It was the same as before. He moved with quiet purpose. He walked directly to Jin's row. He lowered himself to the floor and sat, a great wall of fur and quiet power. He rested his head near Jin's chair. His eyes, half closed, surveyed the room. This time, Alara did not try to teach. She looked at the Frostmane. She looked at Jean. She seemed to understand that a different kind of lesson was happening. "Well," she said, her voice softer than usual, "it seems we have a guest observer. Let us all try to focus." The class tried, but it was impossible. The presence of the apex beast was a magnet for every thought. It was a silent judge. About halfway through the class, Mina did something. She finished her work on her learning pad. She took a small data crystal from her bag. It was a pale green color, the kind used for sharing personal media. She looked at the Frostmane. The creature's ice blue eye was open, watching her. Mina took a slow, deep breath. She stood up. She walked, step by careful step, toward Jin's desk. The whole room watched. Kala's 4 hands stopped moving. Leo held perfectly still. Mina stopped a few feet away. She looked at Taeyong first, giving a small, respectful dip of her head. The great beast blinked slowly. Then she looked at Jean. Her dark eyes were serious. "Jean," she said, her voice a little shaky but clear. You helped me at the preserve. Thank you." She held out the green data crystal. It is a recording of the spore hum from my home forests. The sound I told you about. I thought you might like to hear it." Jean looked at the crystal. He looked at her face. He saw no fear now. He saw an effort, a hard, brave effort to cross a bridge. He reached out and took the crystal. It was cool and smooth, Thank you, Mina, he said. I would like that. Taeyong let out a soft, huffing breath through his nose. It wasn't a growl. It almost sounded like approval. Mina's shoulders relaxed. She gave a small, real smile and went back to her seat. It was a tiny thing. But in the silent classroom, it was like a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples spread. When class ended and Taeyong left, the students did not rush out. They moved more slowly. Tall, gathering his crystals, looked over at Jean. Your plant, he clicked, his translator finding the words. The small one in your room window. It is from your world. Jean nodded. It is. It is very old. It is called a bonsai. It survives in this station light? Tal asked, genuine curiosity in his clicking tones. It survives in many lights, Jean said. It is tough. Tal considered this. He gave a slow click of understanding. Then he left. That afternoon, Jean did not go straight to his room. He went to the quiet observation lounge, a place with a big window looking out at the stars. He usually avoided it because others were often there. Today, the boy with the bark-like skin, was there. He was looking at the stars. He saw Jean come in. He did not leave. He simply pointed at the viewport. The birth cloud of my lineage is just visible tonight, Day said, his voice its usual dry rustle. Near the blue star. Jean walked over and stood beside him, not too close. He looked where Day pointed. He saw the faint, glowing smudge of the nebula. It is very beautiful, Jean said. It looks peaceful. It is, Day said. Then, after a pause, he added, your star, your sun. It is a stable kind, yes? Mostly stable, Jean said, choosing his words carefully. It gives us life. It can also give sunburns. Day made a soft, rustling sound that might have been a laugh. A small price, he said. He looked at Jean. Your guardian, he is formidable. He sees value where we did not look. Jean didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded. Day stayed, and they looked at the stars together in a comfortable silence. It was the first time since arriving that Jean had shared a silence with someone that didn't feel heavy or empty. It just felt quiet. The Frostmane had not spoken a word. He had not defended Jean with claws or teeth. He had simply sat beside him. In doing so, he had held up a mirror to the whole class. He had shown them that their fear was a choice. And now, one by one, they were starting to make a different choice. Taeyong came every day. He would appear at the classroom door, a massive shape of white and blue fur against the pale hallway. He would walk to Jin's desk and sit. Sometimes he dozed. Sometimes he just watched the room with his calm, ice-blue eyes. He became a part of the schedule, as regular as the first bell. His presence changed the air in the room. The nervous tension, the fear that had once surrounded Jean, began to melt away. It was replaced by a slow, careful curiosity. The Frostmane was not a pet. He was not a friend. He was a fact of nature, a powerful and intelligent being who had made a clear, silent statement. And that statement forced everyone to look again. A few days after Mina gave Jean the data crystal, she approached him again. This time it was in the recreation dome. Jean was sitting on a low bench, watching the others play the light orb game. He wasn't hiding. He was just observing. Mina sat down on the other end of the bench. She kept a respectful distance. Did you listen to the spore hum? She asked. Jean nodded. I did. Sounds like deep music, like the forest is singing to itself. Mina's face brightened. Yes, that is it exactly. She played with the fabric of her tunic. Jean, the plant you have, the bonsai, could I see it sometime? I am interested in how life from different lights grows. Jean was surprised. He looked at her. Her expression was open, sincere. Okay, he said. After classes today? She agreed. That afternoon, Mina followed Jean to his room. She paused at the doorway, looking at the small, spare space, the special gravity plate on the floor, the single bed. Her eyes went straight to the windowsill. The bonsai sat in its gray pot, twisted and strong under the pink glow of the corridor moss. Oh, Mina breathed, her voice full of wonder. She moved closer, her floating hair drifting around her face. It is so small, and so full of shape. It looks patient. It has to be patient, Jean said. On Earth it would grow very tall, but it lives in a small pot. It adapts. It becomes something beautiful in its own way. Mina reached out a slender blue hand, then stopped. May I? Jean nodded. She gently touched one of the tiny, scale-like leaves. It is tough, she said, echoing Jin's word. Like you. Jean didn't know what to say to that. We thought toughness was the same as being dangerous, Mina said softly, looking at the tree. We thought a death world only made things that want to fight. But this is toughness that is quiet, that endures. She looked at Jean. I am sorry we were afraid. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. It's okay, Jean said, and for the first time he felt like it might actually be okay. Word spread, not in a loud way, but in the quiet way things moved through the institute. Tal asked Jean a question in class about Earth's mineral cycles. Leo, floating by his desk, asked if Jin's world had low-gravity areas like mountains. The questions were no longer about danger. They were about difference. One day, Alara gave them a group project. They had to design a theoretical habitat that could support 2 different life forms. She assigned the groups randomly. The computer placed Jean with Day and a quiet girl named Sue, who had large, dark eyes and skin that shimmered faintly like a pearl. They met at a work table in the library. For a moment, the old silence threatened to return. Sue looked nervously from Jean to Day. Day rustled softly. My world has fungi that break down rock, he stated. They could create soil. Jean thought. Earth has worms and insects that aerate soil. They keep it healthy, even if they look strange. Sue, encouraged, whispered, on my world, floating spores provide gentle, constant nutrients. They began to work. They combined their ideas. Jin's contributions were no longer seen as frightening Deathworld concepts, but as useful pieces of a puzzle. A worm was not a monster. It was a helper. A tough plant was not an invader. It was a foundation. They were finishing their design when Taeyong padded into the library. He came to their table. He looked at their work on the screen, his great head tilting. Then he sat down heavily on the floor right behind Jin's chair, a warm, silent wall of support. Sue jumped a little, but then she saw the creature was just sitting, watching. She relaxed. Day made a dry, rustling chuckle. He approves of our habitat, I think. Jean reached back, without thinking, and let his fingers brush the thick, cold fur of the Frostmane's shoulder. Taeyong leaned into the touch slightly. Sue's pearl-like skin shimmered brighter for a second. You are friends with him, she said, not as a question, but as an understanding. Not friends, Jean said, looking at the great beast. We understand each other. We are from similar kinds of places. Places that are not always easy. The group fell into a comfortable silence, working together. The bubble was gone. Jean was no longer an island. He was part of the group, connected by shared purpose, and guarded by a quiet giant who had shown them all that there was nothing to fear. Later, as Jean walked back to his room alone, he passed a group of younger students. They pointed at him and whispered. He braced himself for the old feeling. But one of them, a small being with big eyes, said in a clear, piping voice, "That's the human, the one the Frostmane guards." There was no fear in the voice. There was awe and a little excitement. Jean kept walking. He felt the quiet of the station around him, but it no longer felt like a wall. It just felt like quiet. The peace here was different from Earth's peace, but maybe, he thought, there could be room for both. Maybe there could be room for him. The changes were not sudden. They grew slowly, like Jin's bonsai tree. Taeyong still came to class most days, a quiet mountain of fur by the human boy's chair. But now his presence was familiar. He was no longer a shocking statement. He was just Taeyong. And because he had chosen Jean, Jean was no longer a shocking mystery. He was just Jean. One afternoon, Jean brought his bonsai tree to the classroom. He carried the small gray pot carefully and set it on the corner of his desk. The twisted little tree looked strange and wonderful under the classroom's soft light. "It is a piece of a death world," Jean explained to the class when they stared. "But not a piece that bites. It is a piece that waits and grows strong where it is planted." The others gathered around, not in a crowd, but one or two at a time. They asked quiet questions. How old was it? Did it need storms to live? Jean explained about careful pruning, about patience, about shaping something beautiful over a very long time. Sue, the pearl-skinned girl, whispered, "It is like a story. The shape is its history."
Mina nodded.
"It is not so different from our crystal song sculptures. They grow slowly too into harmony." Jin's world was no longer just a list of dangers. It was a place that could make something as patient and tough as the bonsai. It was a place with stories. A few days later, in the recreation dome, a different game appeared. It was Jin's turn to share. He had asked Mr. Choi for a special favor. The keeper had nodded and brought him a flat board made of dark, smooth wood. It was lined with a grid of thin, white lines. He also brought 2 small bowls. One held smooth white stones. The other held smooth black stones. "This game is called Go," Jean told Mina, Day, Tal, and Leo, who had gathered to see. "It is very old. It is not about speed or light. It is about territory, about surrounding space. It is about thinking ahead. It is peaceful strategy." He showed them the simple rules. You placed a stone to claim a point. You tried to surround your opponent's stones. The goal was to control more of the board. They were confused at first. Their games were about beauty or cooperation. This was different. This was quiet conflict without violence. A battle of minds. Day played the first game against Jean. His bark-like fingers carefully placed the black stones. He was slow and thoughtful. Jean was patient. They played for a long time, not speaking. The others watched, their eyes following the growing patterns of black and white on the board. Day lost. But when the last stone was placed, he made a rustling sound of deep interest. "It is like ecosystems," he said. "One life expands, but must leave room for the other, or it chokes itself. It is balance, but a competitive balance. I understand this." Soon others wanted to try. They found the quiet focus of the game calming. It was a kind of thinking they understood: patterns, consequences, territory. It was a piece of Jin's world they could hold in their hands, and it was not scary. It was clever. It was beautiful in its own, stark way. One day, Taeyong did not come to class. The door remained shut. Jean felt a small, unexpected pang. But when he walked into the room, he found that the space around his desk was no longer empty. Mina had saved the seat next to her. "I thought we could work together on the star chart project," she said. Jean sat down. No one flinched. No one moved away. Later, he saw Mr. Choi in the hallway. The big man gave him a small smile. "Taeyong is resting today. Old bones. But he asked me to check on you." He winked. Metaphorically speaking. Jean smiled back. Felt easy. The final test of the term was a group presentation. The theme was unexpected harmony. Jin's group was himself, Mina, and Day. They decided to present on the Leporian Frostmane and the Human. They stood at the front of the class. Jean spoke about Earth not as a death world, but as a world of dynamic balance. He spoke about how strength could be used for protection. Mina spoke about the instinct to fear the different. Day spoke about the moment when understanding changes perception, when a guardian's choice makes you see the guarded one in a new light. They showed an image of Taeyong sitting by Jin's desk. "This is harmony," Mina said, her voice clear and sure. "Not because they are the same, but because they respect what the other is. An apex being sees value. That is the true lesson." When they finished, the class was quiet. Then Alara began to clap, a soft, chiming sound of her hands. The others joined in, not with loud noise, but with a warm, genuine sound of approval. After class, Jean walked to the large viewport in the observation lounge. He looked out at the stars, at the gentle swirl of Mina's birth cloud, at the steady light of his own sun. Far away, he heard soft footsteps. It was most of the class. Mina, Day, Su, Tkal, Leo. They stood beside him, not too close, but together, looking out. It is a big universe, Day rustled. It has room for many kinds of peace, Mina added. Jean nodded. He thought of his quiet room, his bonsai, the solid weight of Taeyong beside him, the feel of a smooth ghost stone in his hand. He thought of the silence that was no longer lonely. The Harmony Orbital Institute had been trying to teach him about the gentle peace of safe worlds. But he had, in the end, taught them about a different kind of peace. The peace that comes after understanding. The peace that is not the absence of strength, but the right use of it. The peace of an apex beast choosing to sit silently beside a child, and in doing so, teaching an entire classroom how to listen to a new kind of quiet. That he was not an island anymore. He was a point on the grid connected to others, part of the pattern. And that was the most unexpected harmony of all.